Kimi was one of the fastest drivers I'd ever worked with, and the way in which he closed out the 2005 season was testament to that. After the American debacle at Indianapolis, we won 7 of the next 10 races and did well to stay in touch with Alonso in his quick and reliable Renault. One race win, though, stands out for me as possibly the best and most celebrated of my career, despite it happening in Japan just one race after Fernando had finally secured the 2005 title. Hey guys, welcome back to another Tales from the Treehouse. And of course today I'm talking about that Grand Prix in Suzuka where Kimi started so far back on the grid that we thought it was just going to be another dismal and disappointing afternoon, and yet it turned out to give us a result that none of us expected. There was only the Constructors' Championship left to compete for at that stage, which was more than enough motivation for me, but our luck seemed to run out pretty quickly. The wet second half of qualifying had hindered the front runners' laps more than the back of the pack drivers who'd been scheduled to go out earlier when the conditions were more favourable. And you'll remember that qualifying when we all went out at different stages, and the leading cars, of course, went out at different stages to the cars that were towards the back of the grid. So if you had changeable conditions or a circuit that was drying or getting wetter, it favoured some more than others, and it massively hampered some more than others. On that day, the leading cars, so us, Fernando Alonso, ended up a long way back down the grid. Fernando Alonso had qualified way back in 16th position, with Kimi one place even further back from him in 17th. Our teammate Montoya was one more place even further back than that. That is a topsy-turvy grid for that period of time. These were the guys that, I guess, in the equivalent of today's modern Formula One, that's the Lewis Hamiltons, that's the Valtteri Bottas, the Max Verstappens, the guys who you would expect to be locking out the front row, and yet we were right down the back of the grid. From a fan's perspective, it set up a brilliant afternoon. For us though, it's the last thing we really wanted in this fight for the Constructors' Championship. When the race came around, Kimi flew out of the traps like a bullet, picking off the back markers with a series of sensational moves, brimming with confidence as he moved quickly up the order. I remember the start being amazing, and I had total belief in Kimi. Even though we'd started 17th, I had total belief that we could make our way towards the front to get a valuable bunch of points that afternoon. And if Montoya could do the same, well, our Constructors' Championship hopes, well, they wouldn't be over. Montoya, though, crashed out, which massively dented our ability to score Constructors' points in what was still a very tight battle with Renault. Kimi, though, forged on. It was thrilling to watch him advance, getting to within reach of the next batch of cars, and then the next. He was doing so well that the pressure to deliver fast, smooth pit stops became even greater for us as the race went on. But each one went well, thankfully, and Kimi's charge continued. After the final pit stop, Kimi emerged from the pit lane just 2 seconds behind the race leader, Giancarlo Fisichella, in the other Renault car. That was an amazing achievement. We completed all of our pit stops, which, believe me, the pressure in that situation is just, it's indescribable. Our driver was making such progress, working his way through the field in this unbelievable race that I could only imagine the commentators describing, full of superlatives, the way he was picking people off and moving forward. And yet there were these 2 or 3 occasions during that Grand Prix when that progress was kind of out of Kimi's hands and it fell all to us in the pit lane. If we'd messed up a pit stop, if we'd taken an extra couple of seconds, it would have not only hampered his progress towards the front, but could have put us out back behind a bunch of the cars that we'd already spent so long overtaking. That was it then, a sprint to the flag in the closing part of the race. We caught Fisichella, the race leader, but passing him, of course, was another thing altogether. The pair of them battled wheel to wheel. We could barely watch. Kimi closed at the same point on each lap, but the Renault driver was wise to the challenge and defended successfully every single time. And I do remember sitting in the garage watching that happening, thinking we had strengths in our car that meant on certain parts of the lap we were absolutely gaining over Fisichella. And could it be that this time this would be it? But there are only certain points around that lap where you can actually affect an overtake. And of course, Fisichella was wise enough to make sure that he positioned his car in a defensive way, or he got a good run out of the corner, enabling him to defend against whatever Kimi could throw at him. And lap after lap after lap, we willed Kimi on from inside the garage, sitting in the chairs, clenched fists around the edge of our seats, just gripping on, because the entertainment and the excitement was just just brilliant. It was thrilling stuff. I can only imagine what the fans looking on as neutrals or as Kimi fans from around the world must have been thinking about how this kid who thought his weekend was kind of over had suddenly turned it into something where we were on the brink of leading a race, having started 17th. But after trying so hard for so many laps, I mean, I even remember thinking, is this maybe just not going to quite be the fairy tale that it could have been? Even if it wasn't, coming second from starting that far back would have been an amazing achievement. The laps ticked away and it looked as though we'd have to settle for second place. But going into the last lap of the race, Kimi put the pressure on again. And this time, a small mistake from Fisichella meant our closing speed was just too much to defend. They went wheel to wheel, but Kimi was through and our entire garage erupted. I promise you, it was a little bit like when Lewis Hamilton got to win his championship in 2008. We burst into life because that pent-up frustration and tension just all came flooding out in that moment. I mean, I've seen that moment replayed now over and over on TV. In fact, many of you guys have sent me clips from inside the garage, from the TV cameras picking up, of us literally leaping out of our chairs. And that's the only thing I can say that describes it, that moment of bursting out of that frustration and tension that we'd had for so many laps. It was an amazing feeling, I promise you. We pulled away and led for the remainder of the final lap and brought home what was a very, very special victory. The second half of the race has been so tense, watching our man get closer and closer to the front, playing our part in the pit stops, and then the drama of those final few laps. When he finally crossed the line in front of us all, hanging over the pit wall to cheer him home, the outpouring of emotion was almost overwhelming. And we went wild. And we did go wild. You know, we were leaping around the pit lane. We were jumping for joy. We'd had the disappointment of coming up short in the driver's title race that season. And Fernando clinching that title, as I said, you know, just a couple of weeks earlier. And so from that disappointment, then earlier in the Grand Prix, knowing that Montoya had crashed out and our Constructors' Championship hopes were taking a massive dent, the disappointment of that was then just transformed into utter joy and an outpouring of emotion. I remember leaping around the pit wall, hugging all of my teammates, of course, climbing up on the fence to wave Kimi home, and then climbing down, high-fiving everybody on the pit wall, the Ron Dennises, the Martin Whitmarshes, and then being congratulated by the Renault guys, which was a really nice moment. We had an amazing relationship with the guys in the Renault team over the course of that period of time where we battled them hard for that championship, and ultimately they came out on top, you know, but we had a really great relationship between the two teams. Actually, at the end of the season, when they did win the championship, Ron Dennis told all of us, and this is very un-Ron Dennis-like, told us all to go and get the champagne out of hospitality, get as much of it as we could, run down into the Renault garage, which was next door to us in the pit lane, and unload the lot and celebrate with them, because it was such a great battle. Yes, they deserved it. They had a much more reliable car. They'd been dependable over the season, whereas we'd been blisteringly fast, but the car and the engine had let us down on too many occasions, so they deserved to take it. And on that moment when Kimi took the victory from Fisichella on that final lap in Suzuka, we had the same reciprocation from the Renault boys congratulating us on what was just an unbelievable victory. And when I say we went wild at the end of that, we went wild. And on the Sunday night, of course, the race night in Japan, that area of Japan, it's not Tokyo. It's a very quiet part of the world. There's not a huge amount to do, but there is one karaoke bar. There is. Give me a moment while the dogs just bark at the postman walking down the street. There is a karaoke bar at the circuit that on a Sunday evening after the Grand Prix, the entire grid, the entire pit lane used to end up descending upon to some extent, and just having the biggest, wildest party, because there were no TV crews, there was no media, there were no cameras, there were no mobile phones even back then. We could get away with all sorts. And so we went crazy on the Sunday night. But what happened after that was we were going directly from there to China for a double-header, back-to-back race the following weekend. And me and a couple of guys on our crew weren't actually due into the track in China until the Wednesday, I think. We went wild on Sunday night. We flew to Shanghai on Monday morning and basically continued going wild in Shanghai all the way through Monday afternoon, Monday night, all the way through Tuesday, and eventually crashed and burned at some stage on Tuesday night, where we took a very long extended sleep over the course of Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning to kind of recover, get ourselves back on track and reset to go again for the following race. It was one of the races that I've celebrated hardest in my entire career, and I was really pleased to be able to do that with Kimi and with this amazing crew that we had at McLaren at that time. So one of my favourite, most celebrated, and I think proudest moments of my McLaren career was to be part of that Kimi crew that delivered a special result after a very disappointing Saturday. I hope you enjoyed that one, folks. There's plenty more in here. If you'd like to check out the book, there's a link in the description, and I'll be back with more of these. So please do drop me any suggestions for anything else you'd like to see me cover from right up here in the Treehouse, and I'll be back very soon. See you later, guys. Ta-da.